conformance, and instead of having inspectors, State of Oregon has certified assessors who help the homeowners with prescriptions and in filling out the certification card. So it's a different approach, and it's been very successful in Oregon. If in the future anyone has any questions, here's my contact information. I'd be happy to help anyone at any time. And James, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Cheryl. Do appreciate it. This is, will lead into a segue into our third poll, which will, is there interest in your state to adopt a law similar to Oregon or California? Again, single answer question, yes, no, or don't know. And it looks like I'm just churning and churning and churning here. many of the folks don't really know. Cheryl,
yes,
there have been a lot of fires in the southeast in the last several years. Do you have an idea of which of these laws, either California or Oregon, be applicable to them? Do you have a sense of that?
Well, I think any state needs to come up with their own laws. The South is very different from the West. We're generally not as mountainous, and slope is a big issue. So in Florida, for example, where I live, slope isn't really a factor.
Right.
So we would have to create different laws that really spoke to our landscape and our situation.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Cheryl. Our last speaker is Phil Stenbeck. He is, again, the Senior Planner for Douglas County Planning Department in Douglas County, Oregon. He's been the planner there for 15 years. He has represented Douglas County in the rewrite of Oregon's statewide Planning Goal 7, Natural Hazards, in 1997. He's a contributor to the State of Oregon's Natural Hazard Technical Resource Guide, and he has supervised the development of Douglas County, Oregon's FEMA-approved multi-jurisdictional natural hazard mitigation plan in 2003. So, Phil, take it away.
Good morning, James. This is Phil Stenbeck in Douglas County, Oregon. We're located in beautiful southwestern Oregon. We're a community of about 5,000 square miles where you'll find about 3 million acres of forest land. Douglas County is known for its beauty. It's got the North Umpqua River that runs through it, known worldwide for its fishing, steelhead, and salmon. And in general, the recreation is outdoors, and folks love to visit, so I'm inviting you all. What I'm going to speak on today is kind of the view on wildfire planning from the local planning department's perspective. It's going to be focused mostly kind of giving you the opportunity to see how you go from a non-regulatory document to actually creating regulations and getting them in place through the local ordinance programs you have. In some communities, a planner like myself is referred to as a member of the community development department, or a building department sometimes plays a role in the activities. So I've titled my presentation today "Inside a Planner's Mind." So I'm trying to let you know I've been involved with wildfire planning, and but today's presentation is going to be mostly about taking that wildfire planning and turning it into regulatory tools. So to start with, I'm going to take you to a view from a planner which has to do with land use planning in general. Whenever you work with a planner, you need to have a little bit of his perspective, and that's what I'm trying to give you today. Planning has always been involved with fire. Fire goes back in planning, general land use planning history in long ways. It goes back to England. There was a fire in 1666 which burned down London. So what you'll find is land use planners are familiar with fire. Typically the fire activity until recently that planners have been involved with has been with urban areas. And so what you'll find is in urban areas there's a great deal of regulation about fire protection already in place. And so what we have nowadays is we have urban populations, of course, that have outgrown these urban areas. And what we have are some rural areas where you have 2 and 5 acre parcels of land, and then you have your resource areas, which I refer to as resource areas, which are larger parcels of land. You know, typically in our community, we're talking about parcels of land that are 80 acres or larger. So with that in mind, I wanted to compare 5 types of criteria or descriptions of these areas so you can kind of get a view where a planner, or when you talk to a planner might be thinking a wildfire plan might be most applicable. The criteria are listed there. Under urban, number 1, what you'll find is in an urban area, there's a dense lot parcelization and there's a lot of development. You have parcel sizes that are very small. Some of them are 6,500 square feet for a dwelling, or you have apartment buildings and you have, you know, high density commercial areas. And so what you'll find is there's a lot of uniform building code and international building code already in place, which guides fire suppression activities, the design of development. So wildfire planning probably isn't as likely to occur in those areas. These particular urban areas also, under number 3 here, what you'll find is also have fire hydrants. They have adequate water supply, typically a city water system available. The road systems for fire protection and evacuation are all in place. They have curbs and gutters, and the road system provides plentiful and readily available access to and from those locations where it's needed. You also typically have a very well-staffed city fire department on hand that routinely go around and prepare and run drills on fire protection. So if the urban environment does catch on fire, you have staff on hand that is quickly there to assist. When you start talking about your rural areas, your 2 and 5 acre zoning, the lot parcelization and development still looks a lot like urban areas, but suddenly the parcels are larger. You still have a uniform building code in place, in an international building code, where structures are typically built in a safe manner, in a manner that makes them somewhat fire resistant. These areas also have, under number 3 here, a water association typically available for dwelling uses, but not necessarily for fire. So you typically don't have fire hydrants out in these areas. And so what you'll find is your water service association, your water service provider, provides plentiful water for garden activities and living there. But when it comes to fire suppression, it becomes a little less meeting the standard than you would find in the urban environment. The 4th note here has to do with the road system for fire protection and evacuation is typically adequate. So the parcelization that's gone on in these rural, what I refer to as rural areas, there's a lot of homes there, but there's typically a very solid road system, paved, adequate for fire trucks and so forth to get in and out of places relatively quickly. So the fire protection connection to the road system being available for evacuation and getting equipment is typically in place. In these areas, instead of having a staffed city urban fire department available with a very quick response time, in the rural areas, what you'll find is there's a rural fire protection district that's protecting homes, and oftentimes you'll have a forest protection association working to protect areas adjacent to the homes where the lands are on fire. They work together. They team up on the fire response, and so, but the distances they have to travel make it a little slower to get there. Not that they're going any faster or trying any less. It's just the fact that the distances between structures and to the locations start to increase. The 3rd area is the resource area, which here again, the resource area, the parcels become larger. You're talking about 80 acres in size and maybe a home on one 80-acre parcel. There's typically a large amount of fuel. You still have the uniform building code in place and the international building code, so the structures are typically sound. They're you know, built to not burn, but at the same time they're not necessarily built to defend against fire. And at these more rural, these resource areas, what you'll find is typically landowners are going to need to store water on site for fire protection, and clear around their homes. It's very important that they take a certain amount of fire protection responsibility on their own shoulders and do these kinds of activities, which provide a level of defense due to the fact that the distances the fire agencies are going to have to travel to help protect their home are greater, and that they need to be on the spot doing things before they get there to help out. The road system also in these areas may be a challenge for fighting vehicles and evacuation routes. What you find is when you get into your resource areas, the road system itself isn't necessarily always paved. Sometimes it's gravel, then there's road grade, and there's all those kinds of things. And so a land use planner is going to be thinking a wildfire plan in these areas is very important for the life, for the protection from loss of life and structures. What you'll find is the fire protection in those areas is typically the Forest Protection Association and the Forest Service. So you're talking about the hinterlands. You're talking about far enough away from the urban areas where the Forest Service is adjacent and forest lands, and your Fire Protection Association is also available, working to fight fire in the event of the big one when it happens. So as a planner, this is kind of a view of like where I believe, or the way I would see wildfire planning location-wise being needed. The next part is, click the page here. The next part to my presentation has to do with the process, and so I'm trying right now. I don't know if you are in part 2, but at this point,
yeah, we are.
Okay. Part 2 is the non-regulatory regulatory process, and here what you'll find is in a planner's mind the process comes in somewhat 5 pieces basically. The first part, a very important part, is called a support document, and this is typically where I would suggest as a planner the wildfire planning process begins. I would suggest it be non-regulatory, and what that does is that opens the opportunity for all possibilities, all things to be considered, everything out on the table. It involves everybody. You take in a very wide view on the subject. From that very wide view, you'll find that you'll get access to information and ideas and important stuff that if you skip this step and you go right to the land use plan or to a regulatory document, you'll find that you might, from the effort, you might find that you'll miss some very important things that will come out from the research project here, this support document. What I can tell you is Douglas County created their natural hazard mitigation plan in 2003. That was a support document that eventually was adopted, and things were added to the comprehensive plan, the land use plan, and the same with the wildfire protection plans, and we're working on updates to both of those. But the political arena starts playing into the philosophy of the elected officials, starts playing into where is this going, and if you start with a support document, a research document, you kind of put the philosophy of the community aside, and you get a real good background on what's going on, and you basically have done your homework, which makes you very well prepared then to go to the next step, the land use plan. And in Oregon, the land use plan is referred to as the comprehensive plan. In California, it's referred to as the general plan. It's basically a document that's put together. It's the vision of the community. So, and it describes a number of different activities. It's just not about wildfire planning. So when you create a support document about wildfire planning, now you start bringing it into the vision of the community, and now you start blending it with all the other types of activities that the community has an interest in and wants folks to know what they believe or how they feel about. And so you blend the support document in through typically an adoption process. In that adoption process, the information that you take from the support document, if you choose to add to your land use plan, you also begin to develop